Namysłów Pils.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. This is another beer from Poland. And I did have a request from a review of this a while back. And they had it in the Skunk Central round the corner. And for some reason I didn't pick one up. And why was that? I have no idea. But I didn't manage to pick one up. But I was mooching about today in Maidstone Town Centre, and I managed to find some of this stuff from a very good little off licence, and it's an old school off licence as well. It just sells beer. They had Wadworth 6X on there. I've been in there before. They do Wadworth 6X and ESB from Fuller's, which are quite hard to get hold of around here. So there's two great beers that I can get from that shop, and I've got a bottle of 6X in there. I've reviewed 6X on a channel. It's a fantastic beer. You should definitely check that out. I've also reviewed the Fuller's ESB. I think I've reviewed that twice. It's so good, honestly. Fuller's, in my opinion, are one of the best breweries. Even though they have been taken over by Asahi, and even now people are saying that the recipe for London Pride has changed. I don't know. I really don't get that when I drink London Pride on cask. Has it changed in the bottle? To be honest, I haven't had a bottle of London Pride lately. So should I check that out? I don't know. I can't really compare it with the old bottles. I don't think they'd be out of date now, so it wouldn't probably be a fair comparison. But honestly, if you get a pint on cask or keg and it's kept well, there is no difference. Honestly, I was at a funeral in February, and afterwards we went into a pub, and it was a Fuller's pub, and they had a selection of beers, but they had London Pride on there, and I thought I'm definitely going to have some of that. And I ended up drinking about 4 or 5 pints. It was absolutely gorgeous. First pint didn't even touch the sides. So all this about the recipe changing and all that, I'm not saying it hasn't. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Fuller's haven't done something to it. They may have. Asahi may have looked at what they're doing and said, well, these are our preferred suppliers. You buy it from here now. I don't know. I don't know how it works. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to speculate because I don't know the truth. But what I do know is that I've got some of this stuff. Now, this lot are one of the oldest brewers in Europe, believe it or not, and they have been going since they were founded in 1321 in Poland, in a place called Namysłów, of all places. And if you're wondering where that is, it's southern Poland. If you're familiar with Poland, and the nearest biggest city, I think, is Wrocław. I think that's how it's pronounced, Wrocław. If there's any Polish viewers, please correct me in the comments. I'm doing my best to try and pronounce the Polish words, but it's not easy for me. I'm fucking useless at Polish. I believe it or not, I had a Polish mate I used to work with, and he used to try and teach me Polish. And he said I was picking it up quite well, but it's all gone out of my head now. Anyway, but this is quite a good beer from what I've been told. And they were going since then. I think they were taken over or bought out by someone in the 1800s, a German fella who started brewing beer in this castle. I mean, if you look at the front, that's an old medieval castle, and they were brewing beer in there. And that was a continuous thing up until World War II. Now, I don't know whether you know your World War II history, but if you do, you'll know how much Poland suffered during World War II. Honestly, the state of the country when the Germans had pulled out and the Russians were fighting, I mean, it was just carnage. The people suffered unbelievable hardships, very cruelly treated by the Germans. I mean, they were treated as subhumans. They were, to be honest, and I don't want to make light of World War II, but they were treated just as badly as the Jewish people were, and they were considered what the Germans called Untermenschen, which was basically subhuman Slavs. They just didn't have a liking for them, and the Poles suffered greatly. They also came over here and fought very bravely in the RAF and in the army as well, and I think the outcome of World War II, certainly for Britain, would have been different if the Poles hadn't have helped us. And please don't be under the misconception that World War II for Poland ended in 1939. The Poles kept fighting right through to 1945. If you look at the history of, well, certainly in the Western Europe, they fought in the Normandy campaign, they fought in Italy extensively, they fought in the desert extensively as well. They also fought for the Soviets as well. They called it the Polish People's Army, but it wasn't. It was basically Polish prisoners of war that they'd taken, and that they put them to, or dressed them up in Russian uniforms, given them Russian commanders, and made them fight for the Soviet Union. But you have to remember, Poland has always kept its identity, even through the communist times. And I use the word communist very loosely when it comes to Poland. If you speak to most Poles, and certainly the ones I've met, they had absolutely no inkling for communism whatsoever. There may have been a few hardliners in Poland in power, but the rank and file of the country. And the Catholic Church is very strong in Poland as well. If you ever look up the history of the strikes in the early 1980s, the Polish Church it really did keep the Polish people together and unified them against communism. Speaking of which, in 1944, this was still an independent brewer, but because of the way the Germans were retreating and the Soviets were attacking, the brewery was, I wouldn't say abandoned, but it was evacuated, and the staff were all evacuated as well, so production ceased. Of course, after the war, in all these Eastern European countries that fell under the Soviet occupation, every private industry was nationalised, including breweries as well. So this was a nationalised brewery. And of course, in 1989 was when Poland sort of broke free from the shackles of communist rule, and I think it was in 1992 they became an independent brewer again, only to be taken over in, I think, 2007 by Żywiec. If you heard of Żywiec, you've seen the beers over here. To be honest, I think it's better than Tiskia as a beer, but it's not great. I mean, if you want a palate cleanser, it's quite cheap. It's not a bad beer, but that group has taken this over. But I've heard good things about this, and this is their flagship beer. So, without further ado, let's get it open and let's see what's going on. Before we get it open, I'm just going to have a quick rundown of it. Now, this is going to be fucking funny because my Polish is virtually non-existent. I do know that Otwarta Kadzia, I think that's how it's pronounced. Please forgive me for my pronunciation. That means open vats. And this is brewed using a traditional open vat style of brewing. And famous brewers that do that, Schneiderweiss do that. A lot of top fermented beers are brewed that way. I know Schneiderweiss do it with their Weiss beer. You have the open vats where they scoop the residue off the top. And Samuel Smiths do it over here in the UK. I'm sure there is others as well, but they're the two that spring to mind. It's a Pilsner. So and from what I've been gathering, it's very much in the style of a Czech Pilsner. There is Sarts hops in this, whether it's extract or oil, I don't know. But that's what they're going for, and to be honest, that's all I can really make out. But as I say, these are owned by Heineken. It's 500ml and 5.8%, I think it is. It's 5.8. I did hear mention that these used to be 6%, but it's 5.8%. And there's the can with a load of gumph. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce any of that because I'll make myself look an even bigger idiot than I do now. I know that Browar means brewery. Browar, Namysłów. And Namysłów, of course, is a small town just east of Wrocław in southern Poland. So there you go. And yeah, it's Pilsner. These come in green bottles. And I'm glad I got it in a can, because I think if I saw it in a green bottle, I probably wouldn't buy it, because I probably would be giving it a bit of there would be a rant about green bottles. So let's stop before we go into a rant. and let's get this open and see what's going on. Right, a Pilsner in the Czech style. What would you be expecting? I'd be expecting quite nice malty flavours on the palate, but with a bitter, peppery finish from them Sarts hops, if it's in the style of a Czech Pilsner. Now, I have tried some Polish beer before, and to be honest, it's the Polish beer that you get over here. So I'm imagining if you can get it over here, there's big distributors and it's brewed on a big scale. On the nose, what are we getting? Very sweet, believe it or not. Sweet malt. And I should let that calm down a little bit because it's got a little bit of sulphur on there. There it is in the glass. It's a gold, sort of dark, well, light amber, I'd call that. A gold. Fair amount of carbonation in that. Head's quite nice. It doesn't smell too bad, I will say that. Now, I'm not expecting much from this. I'm sort of neutral when it comes to Polish beer. I've tried a few beers from the Baltic states. There's a couple of more reviews. They just sell them around the corner. But the Polish beer that I've tried has been the usual fare. The Perła, the Tiskia and the Żywiec. So this will be another one to add to that bow. Let's get it down the hatch. Bottoms up. One thing that hits you straight away, it's sweet. That is sweet. But there is a little bit of the Sarts hops character there. This is reminding me of I know this is a Pils, and Budvar is a pale lager, but this is reminding me a little bit of the Budvar. If you can imagine a sweetened version of that, it's a little bit like that, and I imagine it's something to do with the Sarts hops that are on this. That is quite full-bodied, and it doesn't taste too bad actually. Is it a Pilsner? Not in the Czech traditional sense of being a Pilsner. I'd say it was more in keeping with a Czech pale lager, because as I say, it reminds me of Budvar. It's the Sarts hops, I think, that are doing that. It's a sweetened version of it, and I ain't sure whether there's sugar in that or some kind of syrup, but it is sweet. Sweet on the palate. No real bitterness on the back end, which is what I'd expect in a Pilsner. Pilsner Urquell. There's one. I know it's a very popular beer, but you do get that on the Pilsner Urquell. It's completely different to your average lager because it's a Pilsner. Pilsners, North German Pilsners and Czech Pilsners have that bitterness on the arse end. I do tend to find that Southern German Pilsners, certainly from Bavaria, are a little bit sweeter. They do have the bitterness going on, but they are a little bit sweeter. This one is, I wouldn't say it's overly sweet, but it's sweeter than your average Pilsner, I will say that. It's quite nice, I will say that. I don't think it compares to the, well, I'm saying it does compare to the Budvar in taste, but it's on the sweeter side of it. But it doesn't taste nasty. The sweetness isn't overpowering. And I've got this, obviously got this in a can. I imagine that would taste completely different from a bottle, a green bottle. You'd get a lot of that skunkiness on it, which, and I've done it before with the Budvar. If you compare a Budvar out of a bottle and Budvar out of a can, it's completely different. And I'm sure the people at Budvar, I should do that actually. I should compare the two, just a bottle and a can. Get a bottle from round Skunk Central. I might even do that tonight, nip round there and get a bottle and just compare them, and the taste is completely different. And if I can do that, I'm sure the people at Budvar know that as well, but they really should do something about it. Now, somebody said to me that there are, and it's true, there are certain hops that don't go skunky, and there's also research that says malt could potentially be another source of skunkiness. You know, that chemical reaction that produces I think it's an acid, some kind of acid, I don't know, I can't remember. I have explained all this, but it's gone in one ear and out the other. But there's a chemical reaction, and it produces the hops that are in there produce a chemical that gives it that flavour, and the chemical is the same chemical, obviously it's the same family of chemicals, I should say. It's not the actual stuff that comes out of a skunk's arris, but it's the same family, as is the cannabis plant. Cannabis and hops are from the same family of plants. Hence the reason sometimes when you get that skunkiness, it does tend to remind me on certain occasions, and I've seen it with people when I open up a bottle of skunky beer and they say it smells like cannabis, and you know, the real strong skunk cannabis, it smells like that. I wouldn't say it's exactly like that, but you do get that grassy smell from a skunked beer, and it isn't nice, and it affects the flavour. And thankfully this is in a can. There is sweetness on there though. I feel that sweetness on my lips. It's like a sugary sweetness. Why did they put sugar in this? It didn't need it. If you'd have kept the sugar out, or just toned it down a little bit, this could have been perfect. This could have been on a par with Budvar. To me, it's just like it smells quite nice actually. The aromas I'm getting now, quite nice. Not amazing, but nice. There's a grassy, peppery note that's coming from that, but that's betrayed with the flavour. Instant sweetness on the palate. There's a hint of the Sarts hops character in there, but it just dominates that sweetness is just all the way through. That could have been great. That could have been on a par with Budvar if they'd have toned down the sugar. As it stands, it's a little sweet for my taste, and it betrays the style. If they'd have called it a Czech lager rather than a Pilsner, I would have got it, but it's Polish and it's a Pilsner, and it's brewed on a big scale. If I can get it over here, it's brewed on a big scale, it's brewed on a large scale, and if I can get it over here, then you know, it's not, I wouldn't say it's macro brewed, but it's brewed on a big scale, so there's more emphasis on getting the stuff out there rather than the actual quality, in my opinion. Having said that, it isn't the worst beer in the world. It's not nasty, it's just a little bit sweet. So, what is the verdict on Namysłów Pils? Well, this is their flagship beer, and I have to say, it's okay. It's not a down the sink job, definitely not. If this was in a green bottle, I think it may have been. It's very sweet, and for a Pilsner, if you like that Czech Pilsner, the bitterness that you get from the Sarts hops, the pepper on the arse end of it, you're not getting that at all. This is a sweet lager, and I don't know whether it's glucose syrup in there or sugar, but you immediately get that sweetness on the palate, and that would be nice. Do you know what? If you had a curry and you didn't want to drink that absolute fucking abortion that they call Cobra, this would be a really good alternative, because that sweetness that you've got in this would be great for a curry, like a spicy curry. It would tone down all them rich, spicy flavours that you get from Indian food. Now, I've seen some twats and they do the food pairings and all that, and they're recommending IPAs to drink with Indian food. Believe me, you do not want to do that. Trust me. The grapefruit bitterness that you get, and even from English IPAs as well, you do get that bitterness, that nice hot bitterness on the finish that just doesn't go with Indian food. You've got so much bitterness going on with the spices and stuff from the food. The last thing you want to be doing is adding to that bitterness. It just doesn't make for a nice experience. Stuff like this, I mean, this is, for me, this is perfect with a curry. This would be, because that sweetness, they get a little bit too much for me. But with something to eat, even like Italian food, like a risotto or something like that, that would be perfect because it is sweet. And burgers as well, barbecues, this would go down great. Not that common though. I did see this in cans in the off license that I went to, and I've seen it in Skunk Central in, I think, bottles, but they're the only two places that I've seen it. I'm sure you should be able to get that round your way, depending on where you are, of course. If you want to try these Eastern European delicatessens or food shops or greengrocers that they have, there's quite a few in London. I know that. Fortunately, unfortunately, a lot of them closed when Britain left the EU. And to be honest, a lot of Poles went back to Poland when their economy started picking up. And you know, you still see the occasional Poles over here, but they're not as abundant as they were, which is a great shame because I really do like Polish people. I've come across them quite a few times. Great sense of humour. They love a beer. Do you know what? They're the third largest, not in size obviously, but they're behind Germany and the Czech Republic. Poland is the third country with the largest consumption of beer, and that's all right by me, because any country that drinks beer and doesn't drink wine is my kind of country. Never been to Poland, I don't think, have I? No, I don't think I have. No, I've not been to Poland. I would like to go. I really would. I've heard great things about it, and it's one of them places, certainly Warsaw or maybe even Gdansk or something like that, or not Gdansk. What's the other place? Is it Krakow? Krakow. I remember I met a fella from Krakow. He was a mate of a mate who went, and he took him over West Ham, and he was saying how great it was over there. And yeah, I didn't ask him what he thought about West Ham. He probably lost that day, so that's probably scarred him for life. But needless to say, I like the Poles. They're a good bunch. Anyone who drinks loads of beer is all right by me. As for this beer, this could have been great if they laid off the sugar. It does remind me slightly of the Budvar, but it's a lot sweeter. I think the reason it's reminding me of that is because of the Sarts hops, but it's still good. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. If you can find it, I recommend it. And if you can find it just before you order a curry, then get some of this, because I'd imagine that'd go down really well. Don't drink that Cobra. That is fucking disgusting stuff. On tap, in a pinch, it will get you out of jail. But if you're having something to eat at home and this stuff's available, I would recommend it, because it's light years ahead of Cobra in terms of drinkability and cleanliness and all that. But it's just a little bit too sweet for me to session this. I'd get a little bit sick of it after about 3 or 4 of them. That sweetness would just do my nutting. But I'm going to drink that, and I may buy that again actually, because I think it was quite cheap. I think it was about £1.20 or something like that a can, which isn't bad. And it's quite a nice beer. If I couldn't get Budvar, I'd probably get that. But yeah, 6 out of 10, recommended. And remember, life's too short to be drinking shitty beer.